Mike VACCARO, the four-time New York Sports Writer of the Year. Mike, it's amazing to see you, and I hope you're doing well.
CT, I'm doing good. How are you doing tonight?
Mm. Yeah, really well, thanks. A lot going on in the Knicks world, obviously, but firstly, I would love to say thanks for coming on again, and your recent column, sharing your journey back into the sports world, it was much appreciated, very very inspiring, and on behalf of all the viewers and fans of yours, we thank you for sharing that story. What's been the reception like since you shared that journey?
It's been remarkable, CT, to be honest. It's amazing how many people that have reached out to me overall, but also people who are either have gone through a similar situation or about to go through a similar situation or pondering the possibility of going through another similar situation. And that's really been meaningful to me because I think I've been able to help them give them a little perspective as to what they're looking at and the fact that it can actually be a good thing on the other side of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Most definitely. Encourage everyone to read up on that. If you don't already, you should be reading Mike's amazing work and column with the New York Post. But the Knicks, there's so much going on at the moment as we're about to embark on the draft next week. And the latest rumors, a lot of activity happening in the NBA. Um, I'll start with the latest. Oh, obviously, Mike, you wrote a great piece on the latest rumors around Bradley Beal and why you felt the Knicks, should look in other directions. And I really, really agreed with that post. Very talented player, but um, how do you see that playing out, that situation, and just your thoughts on the Knicks, tricky situation right now, trying to make an upgrade, but also with expectations after how the season finished.
Right. That's the thing about being where the Knicks are right now, which is kind of ensconced in the middle class in the Eastern Conference. I mean, I don't think they're at the same level right now on paper with the Bucks or the Celtics. Who knows what the Sixers are going to look like next year with Harden if he stays or if he goes. But all that said, I mean, I think everybody's consensus is that the Knicks are an alpha player away from being able to be a legitimate contender. Right now, I think they could run it back, and it would be a very similar looking year to this year. They win enough games to probably get a buy into the playoffs, and then you take your chances in the first round, and maybe you can take a few swings in the second round, which is what happened this year. I mean, I think there's a little regret attached to what happened in the Knicks this year because the Heat obviously were an eight seed, but they were an unusual eight seed. I mean, they weren't really in a lot of people's minds what you consider an eight seed to be, and obviously they went to the finals, so they proved that up time and again, and not only against the Knicks. But so they do need an alpha dog. But I mean, when you start looking about who that guy is, look, as much fun as Bradley Beal would be paired with Jalen Brunson in the backcourt, I mean, that would be a lot of fun every night
Yeah.
to watch, and especially on the offensive end of the floor, it'd be something to see. But that said, Beal has been injury prone the last couple of years. He's a little on the short side. His defense has, especially in recent years, has left something to be desired, which is going to be an interesting piece of chemistry with the coach, who's a very defensive minded coach. And look, I just don't think he's the guy who moves the needle for the Knicks right now. And it's very possible that this summer might come and go and there won't be a needle mover that becomes available. I mean, that's the part now that's really tricky for the Knicks. You have all these people who seem interested now that the Knicks have established something, but it's not easy to acquire these guys. Whether you're talking about a Joel Embiid, who is obviously still under contract with the Sixers, or Karl-Anthony Towns. I mean, or Paul George, who's my personal favorite. I mean, if I were the guy who writing the blueprint here, I would say I would love for Paul George to be the next, targeted alpha dog, even though he obviously isn't a perfect candidate either. There's really no perfect candidate, unless all of a sudden somehow we wake up tomorrow morning and Giannis is on the team or Jokic, which isn't going to happen. At least right now, not right
Yeah.
now. So, I mean, look, I think what Leon Rose has proven is that he's willing to be patient. He didn't pull the trigger on Donovan Mitchell last year, which I disagree with at the time, and for most of the season looked like an unfortunate choice. And obviously, of course, the Knicks got the last laugh in the playoffs. But I mean, if you just look at what Leon's strategy is, I mean, he's been assembling his assets and carefully waiting until he can strike with them. And look, I just think that if you're going to pass on Donovan Mitchell, and I realize that Beal's probably going to cost you less of a haul than Mitchell would have for a lot of reasons, starting with his no trade clause. But I still think that if you've shown this much patience already, show a little more, and see what happens and see what develops, because you do have a team that can still be a workable unit next year, as is with some tweaks. And so I mean that's just my look at it. Bradley Beal is the guy to me that takes you to the next level, which is what a guy, if you're going to invest what's essentially a $50 million
Mm.
player, you really needs to be able to do.
Yeah, I mean, anytime you hear of a player like his caliber available, I'm sure the Knicks would, like any club, do their due diligence. How warm do you think their interest would be? Because I'm hearing multiple reports that, there are many teams, obviously, but the New York Knicks have spoken internally, but as they normally do, it's a big salary, and a move like that would require a lot of moving parts.
A lot of moving parts, and it also takes away a lot of their flexibility going forward. And so, the last thing you'd want is to be, entangled in this contract and
Mm.
still knowing you need a player to be able to get to the next level. And then if that player becomes available, you have no way of getting him because you've just, kind of entangled yourself in a roster mess. So, and a salary cap mess, which is what this is actually, I think, going to ensure if you bring this player in. So, look, I mean, yeah, that's such a disparage Beal because I mean, look, I mean, the two teams that I've heard him attached with besides the Knicks, one is the Heat, and obviously that's just you never know what happens when the guy goes to the Heat and goes into that culture machine, and I'm sure he would be a terrific addition there. Kind of you see what Kyle Lowry did this year, and he's younger than Lowry and more in his prime than Lowry, and if you just kind of have your imagination run free, what he could be with the Heat. And the other one is the Bucks. And look, I mean, if there's if there's anybody who would look like it would be a final piece to ensuring the Bucks can get back to at least being in the finals where they could take another swing at another title, he's a guy that would
Mm.
fit in great there. I mean, and I do think he's better fit with both of those teams than he is with the Knicks, given where the Knicks are and given what the Knicks need to do and given where they want to be.
Yeah, I think the key, you mentioned the words move the needle. I think Leon Rose, the way I see this place happening is, the next move the Knicks make needs to really put them in title contention. They're one alpha dog away, but the fit wise with Tom Thibodeau defensively and Beal's durability and the salary is a big question. But the conundrum is there are a lot of other players that possibly are available, Zach LaVine, Karl-Anthony Towns, with similar question marks. So yeah, how patient can this team be? I'm leaning more towards bringing everyone back and make the upgrades with the mid-level exception, and see where you go from there. Do you lean towards that's going to happen, or do you think we're going to see a really wild free agency and they really probably have a new starting player?
Yeah. Look, I mean, we can play fantasy ball, and that's the fun part of the off season. And look, you can play it out. If Harden goes to the Rockets and all of a sudden Embiid looks in the
Mm.
mirror and says, you know what, this isn't
Yep.
the place where I'm going to win a championship. And obviously there are all the attachments that he has to the Knicks operation right now. Then you start getting the wheel in motion. And of course, he's the reigning MVP. So if he becomes available, then, all of a sudden you're like, what do we do to get this guy here? And what's it going to cost us? And let's find a way to make this happen. I think you're probably less inclined if it's a guy like Karl-Anthony Towns, who's just not who's got such a world of ability and upside. And his ceiling is so high, you just don't know if he's ever going to get there. And certainly, I think that a guy like Paul George, I mean, if things blow up with the Clippers, I mean, who knows? So if any of those things happen, I mean, there's various possibilities of whether they would. Maybe one's 20%, maybe one's 15%, but 10%, who knows? But I mean, you just never know. This time last year, we still thought that the Nets were going to run it back with Kyrie and KD, and that as the summer progressed, that narrative changed. So these things change every day in the NBA, and so you never know. But short of that, to me, I completely agree with you. Upgrade it where you can. I think the way I described it last in that column you referenced is that the Knicks are very much a part of the comfortable middle class, which means I think that if you run it back and you pretty much keep everybody healthy next year, I think you're looking at a team that's a 45 to 50 win team. That probably lands you close to where you were this year, which is a fourth or fifth seed. So you got to play your coin toss game in the first round and then see if you can take somebody out. Which you don't want to do over the course of 5, 6, 7 years. But if you're building something carefully, and look, I mean, I would think that I know there was a lot of sentiment in the immediate aftermath of the end of the season. Got to get rid of Julius Randle. Can't win with him. That kind of stuff. I mean, I think we're starting to see that. and understand that Julius was pretty hurt during the playoffs and wasn't himself. He would never, of course, cop to that. But he had a terrific season. I mean, you look at you don't make the All Star team, you don't become an All NBA player. You don't just hand those things out in the lottery. He earned those things. And it's because if you watch him night after night, Julius had a terrific year. Now, is he a perfect player? Of course he's not. Is he the alpha dog on a championship team? He's not, and I don't think anybody believes that. But like we said, as we're not talking about bringing everybody back and hoping they can scratch out 32 wins. I think we're talking about a team that you can reasonably expect to pencil in for 45, 47, 48, 50 wins. And so that's a representative team. It's not where you ultimately want to go. You want to bide your time until you get that guy. And I think there's been some wonder, and the fact that he doesn't talk very often, allows for speculation to grow about is Leon just gun shy? Is he just, unwilling to pull a trigger? I think that's unfair because I think what we saw last year. I mean, certainly you could have had that opinion when he didn't go for the Mitchell situation, but what we're seeing is that when I want to say he's being more patient, more diligent, more, less. The Knicks kind of game plan over the last 20 years has been to shoot first and then ask questions later, and that's not worked well. It generally doesn't work well in a salary cap league where you pay for every mistake. And so I think that he's being careful, and he wants to be able to wait until that guy comes around, and then you pounce. And I think that's probably the proper way to go about it. And short of that, like you said, the trying to build your team elsewhere, kind of like what the Nuggets did. I mean, bring a guy in for a year, let him thrive in the system, and then he can, he can make a lot of money somewhere else. But you've benefited by his stay here, and I think that's not a terrible game plan for the Knicks to follow right now.
Yeah, 100%. You're on the money. And in terms of the position the Knicks are in, it's unique because they haven't really had a situation where they have all their draft picks. They're not capped out. They have reasonably, cost-friendly contracts. And with the cap changing, that's obviously an advantage for the Knicks right now with very tradable contracts. And I don't think their contracts are going to get any worse. If anything, you could argue RJ Barrett's value around the league should get better. Julius
Correct.
Randle's value is probably going to stay where it's at. Maybe he'll have a better playoff performance with no injury. Young players like Emmanuel Quickly, who is garnering some interest around the league. Obi Toppin, could you see some more of those kind of fringe moves with Obi? If the interest is really high in Emmanuel Quickly, who wants to be a starter, he's extension eligible now. How do you see that playing out with those two young players' rookie contracts ending?
Yeah, I mean, you're at a fairly important part of their development now because you have to decide: do you want them long term or do you want to use them as assets? And I think they'll both be very valuable assets. Maybe not, one on one with anybody that you really want, but certainly as part of the package. And I think I think that would have been the case last year if they would have gone for Mitchell. I think it's the case now when you look around the league at the guys that they might be able to target. So yeah, I mean, look, I mean, both, especially Quickly. I mean, Quickly really came into his own this year. He had a pretty rough playoff stretch, but I don't think you can necessarily just judge a player on that, especially a young player. You saw what he did during the course of the year. You saw he was at his best, when the Knicks were hobbled. I mean, he stepped in a lot of times when Brunson was hurt, and really the Knicks never missed a beat. I mean, there was that wonderful game he had 38 points in double overtime against the Celtics, which kind of I think resonated. That was an important game not only for him but also for the Knicks because I think, look, when you're able to put that kind of a game on tape against that kind of team and deliver as he did, that piques interest. And it's you never know, team to team, GM to GM, how they value a player, but I do think there's a lot of value in him. And look, it wouldn't be terrible if he was a Knick for the next 5 years either. But I mean, I think that he's definitely a guy. Look, I mean, even the Nuggets are gonna tinker. They just won the championship, and there's gonna be tinkering, and there's gonna be a different team wearing that uniform next year than the one that went in the parade the other day. And I think that's certainly the case for a team like the Knicks, which knows that it has to keep scaling the mountain upward, and has the ability to do that. And one of the reasons why they're able to do that is because you have young assets like Top and like Quickly, like Grimes, like Deuce McBride. I mean, these are all guys who showed enough this year where they have real value to where that could be something that could be a great chit return if that's what you want.
Yeah. And obviously, there since we last spoke, Scott Perry's tenure came to an end with the Knicks. What's your read on a replacement and in terms of the next guy, the general manager, contributing with the draft coming up? Do you see the Knicks possibly getting into the draft also?
Well, I think that I think look, if Leon has shown us anything, it's that he's willing to listen to everything. I think one of the great things you can say about Leon right now is that one of the real strengths he's shown is being able to find guys in the back of the draft, the back of the first round, and the second round that are really useful. I mean, quickly Grimes, McBride, those guys have all become useful players, and they weren't top 10 picks the way Obi was. Um, it's unfortunate that the mess with the Mavericks happened because it would have been very intriguing right now to have a conversation as to who the Knicks will be looking at, with the 11th pick or the 12th pick, whatever they could have had if the Mavs hadn't gotten the complete tank mode. But you know, barring their ability to somehow land in the top five, which I just don't see how that's how that would happen. It would surprise me if they do a thing like look. I mean, there are always teams willing to sell their very late first round, early second round picks. Maybe the Knicks are in the market for that. They've shown themselves to be the team that actually sells those picks in the last couple of years sometimes. But I think most of his energy is going to be concerned about established players and seeing who they can bring in that will be the kind of fit, the kind of fit that Hart was last year. I mean, I think a lot of us got carried away in terms of trying to compare him to people. I know I use the word DeBusschere a lot, and I would always make the disclaimer that I wasn't saying he was as good a player as David DeBusschere. I was talking about the impact that he was able to have in the middle of the year, the same positive impact that DeBusschere had when he arrived in the 68-69 season. Not comparing them as players, but that's actually, of course, what you hope for as a GM is that when you add these players that one after the other, what they do is help get you higher in the caste system to where not only are you winning more games, not only do you have more chances to have playoff success, but also you're making your team more attractive for those players out there who are looking, because in the modern NBA, there's players are allowed to establish their own narrative, and part of how they do that is they identify places they want to be. I mean, there's no question right now that that a mid-level type player, if he can go to Denver, is going to go to Denver because he knows he's going to make money by playing 1 year with Jokic, and just showing the world how good he can be because playing with Jokic and Murray is going to maximize that ability, and that's the dream. You have a good team that's also attractive to other players who will allow them to keep getting better, and that's what the Knicks want to do right now. Instead, part of their problem for so long, CT, as you know, is that they were considered poison, and nobody wanted to come here because nobody wanted to throw their career away. Well, that's clearly not the case anymore, and I think they're going to try and maximize that. And I think Leon is smart enough, and he's got enough contacts throughout the sport that that's how he's going to want to go from here, is to make this an attractive enough venue where a player wants to come and be a part of things. And I think
Yeah,
that to answer your question, I mean whoever replaces Mills in that role is going to obviously have to fit into whatever Leon's vision is there because and I think and I said Mary Mills, I meant Perry. A lot of times those guys got interchanged because they were they were 1 and 1A in the corporate flow chart for so long. But obviously, I mean, I meant Perry. And look, I mean, I thought he worked very well with Leon, and finding a guy like that who he works with, I think is what's going to be his imperative.
yeah, you hit it with the Josh Hart comparison, in terms of just changing their season, and they're going to get a deal done, I feel like, and it's going to be a number that some fans may not be happy with, but just in the playoffs, with Tom Thibodeau, and also some performances we saw from RJ Barrett, some surprises overall. Like, how did you feel Tom Thibodeau coached late in that Miami series? Do you feel like it was just experience and Eric Spoelstra's coaching, and the Knicks just had some injuries? If that series was replayed again, do you feel like the Knicks still would have had a great chance to win that? You
I
know?
do. I do. Look, I mean, if in the perfect world, right? I mean, Julius is healthy. I don't think that Brunson was entirely healthy. Hart obviously tweaked his ankle, and he had impending fatherhood on his mind. So, I mean, look, I mean, no team has a perfect situation, right? I mean, obviously Butler was probably hurt for the Heat also, and but you know, specific to Thibodeau, look, I mean, I think you saw in the first round against the Cavs. I mean, he just completely pantsed BJ Bickerstaff. Thibodeau is one of the best coaches in the league. I think Spoelstra might be the best coach in the league, and that's when you see, you know, I mean, did Spoelstra out coach Thibodeau in the second round? I think he did. I mean, I don't think that Tom was embarrassed. I mean, I think he did what he could. I think if he had one thing to do over again, I think in game one after Jimmy went down, he would have taken more advantage of that than they did. Made a point of it. You know, it's like, but that's, you know, because in the moment it seemed like they could have done more. And look, I mean, you know, what we know about the Knicks, not just this year, but in their history, when they lose game one at home, it's a real it's a bad situation because they're always they're forever chasing, and that's what happened in the series. You know, they just could not get that game back in Miami despite three chances. Had a great opportunity in Game Six, but you know, the problem is when those become must games as opposed to house money games. And you know, the Knicks obviously showed they can win those games in round one. They won game one and they closed it out in game five, and I thought was very impressive. But
Yeah,
look, I mean, but you know, you talk about a perfect world. In a perfect world, they don't see the Heat at all. They see the Bucks, and the Bucks. If the Bucks are playing as the Bucks can, then they probably, you know, maybe it's a 5 game loss. You know, I mean, because that's just how good the Bucks are. Obviously, I mean, the Heat took advantage of an opportunity that the Bucks presented them, and that's why the Heat were there, you know, for the Knicks in round two. I mean, look, if in a perfect world, then the Knicks wouldn't have had to worry about the Heat at all because they would have won their first play-in game, and you know, they would have avoided that side of the bracket. But you know, nothing about basketball is perfect, and nothing about the NBA or the playoffs usually goes according to blueprint.
yeah, correct. Yeah, it could have gone so many ways, and I think shooting ultimately, the Knicks still have a great chance to address that with the mid
Yeah,
level. You know,
yeah,
Max Strauss.
they could really use a
Yeah,
sniper, and you know that's the one thing that you know. Look, I mean, guys can get hurt, can get hot day to day for the team, but the one guy you can rely on and say that's our sniper. That's a glaring hole for the Knicks right now, which you would think they would want to address.
yeah. And in terms of, you know, you mentioned Paul George, and I kind of agree with the archetype in terms of exactly what the Knicks require to go to another level. But players can come in all sorts of shapes and sizes. If a big five man like Embiid or Cat becomes available, they might go that direction. But if
Right.
you had to, you know, form this team yourself and feel like out of, you know, let's say Mitchell Robinson, Julius Randle, RJ Barrett, considering what he showed in the playoffs, uh, how do you feel this team is leaning towards in terms of making that next big move? Do you see it being the three person, or it could be the four or the five?
Yeah, there's a lot of opportunity. Like, I mean, all of those players you talk about you know, are terrific in their own way, and you know, fit for the Knicks right now, for what the Knicks are right now, which, like we talked before, is kind of like in the middle class of the conference. I think all of them can you know, you could upgrade at any of those positions, and the team would be significantly better. I mean, obviously, in Julius, we're talking about you know, your prime time guy. I mean, the guy who always continues to intrigue me is RJ because, look, I mean, you know, every single year in the league, he's done something better than he did the year before. I mean, his capacity for improvement is on the record. His willingness to work to get there is a matter of
Yeah,
you know, his public record. I mean, look, I mean, I thought this year I was very impressed that you know he was really committed to kind of you know getting to the basket. I don't think he forced as many threes. He still forced enough that I think people got annoyed watching him sometimes. But I think he realized what his bread and butter is, which is to try and you know to try and drive the ball, be a force that way, and then shoot the open three when you have it, not force it. And so to me, I mean, you know, he's a guy who's shown improvement in every year in various aspects of his game. Still only 22. He just turned 22 yesterday, I think. And you know, it's still such a an open book with what he's you know he's not a finished product by any means. I think if we had seen a leveling off at any time in the last couple of years, maybe you say to yourself, well, but you didn't see that, you know, and you keep seeing him going in the right direction, which to me is very encouraging. The thing that's really curious to me is what becomes of Robinson as a player because. Look, I mean, there are moments, and certainly there are moments in the Cavalier series where he looked like the most dominant force on the floor, and he was. The problem is it's only on one side of the floor, and I know he gets a little frustrated sometimes with not being involved in the offense at all. But then you see him on offense, and you realize why the Knicks don't want to involve him on the offense at all. I mean, he's a pretty one-dimensional offensive player. I mean, he's obviously a terrific rebounder, a terrific defensive player, and that intrigues you. But it's also not a bad thing to have a center who can do a little bit of both. And so that's why it's like I really think that to me, when you start talking about the things that are really going to improve the Knicks, it's what's going to help them up front. I think they're fine in the backcourt. I think as long as they have Brunson and a running mate, whoever that running mate is, they'll be fine. I just think they just need a presence up front besides Julius, or who's better than Julius, that'll give him that element. And obviously Robinson doesn't. He just doesn't give him anything offensively besides putbacks and alley oops, which is fine, but you can't. I just don't think you can expect to make it to June that way with that as your center.
Yeah, I'm with you with RJ too. We're hearing rumors now Zion Williamson, and we know the Ja Morant suspension. It's kind of like Nick fans are feeling pretty good about where they landed at the third selection.
All of a sudden, that looks pretty good in retrospect, right? For sure.
Yeah, given his durability is another thing, and age and contract also. But yeah, Mike,
Absolutely.
it's been pleasure chatting, and yeah, whatever the Knicks do, I'm sure there'll be plenty more buzz coming after the draft. I think that's a key date generally where big moves go down.
For sure. Yeah, I think
Mm.
that's going to be. Look, I mean, I wish they would have had the 11th pick or the 12th pick because this makes it a more interesting day when you wonder what they're going to do. And, even if they would have traded it back for assets, whatever, that's kind of part of Leon's game too. But yeah, that's the way these things shake out. So hopefully we can have the conversation next year with that Mavericks pick.
Yeah, most definitely. Well, yeah, take care, Mike.
CT, it's great talking to you. We'll talk to
Yeah,
you again.
yeah, pleasure.